Hello, my name is Becky Prather, and today we're going over the basics about bulb planting for spring. A little bit about me. I've been a gardener all my life, I feel. I was blessed to have a mom and grandparents that encouraged and taught me about gardening. In 2015, I was chosen to be on the Master Garden Walk. I'm retired from teaching at Urbana High School. While I was there, I started 7 raised beds of vegetables and herbs. These were used for foods, earth science, and special ed classes. I was part of a grant for the CUSF, which is the Champaign-Urbana School Foundation, to help teach sustainability to students in both the Champaign and Urbana school districts. While there, one of the things I taught students was how to plant bulbs, compost, and how to build a compost bin. Why garden? Gardening has so many benefits that are actually very beneficial to your health. When you work in the soil, your brain releases serotonin. This is your feel-good hormone, which will indeed make gardening your happy place. When you're gardening, think of how much bending, reaching, and lifting you're doing. Physical exercise stimulates both endorphins and dopamine that tells your brain to get moving and get happy. Working in the garden helps you with your hand and eye dexterity as well as your hand strength. Try using your other hand instead of your dominant hand, and that helps to keep your brain sharp. Don't stress, and don't make this harder than it is. You don't have to be a master gardener to do this. Gardening is a reflection of you, so make it you and put your own personal stamp on it. But how do I do this? Gather different ideas from local gardens, drive around town and see what other people have done in their gardens that you like. Check out Pinterest or garden magazines. Follow someone you like on Facebook or Instagram. I personally follow #GardenAnswer. This gal is fantastic. She has so many creative ideas and she owns a nursery, so she's really up on all the new and old plants. I love the different varieties of flowers she uses and how she landscapes. Gardening is meant to be enjoyable and relaxing. You get to watch what you've planted bloom and grow. The best part is, if you don't like how it came up or how it looked, you can always change it for next spring. It's totally up to you. Since COVID, or as I call it, the plague hit, more people decided to start or go back to gardening. They're doing it as a family and finding out how rewarding it is to grow their own vegetables and flowers. They're also realizing that vegetables taste a lot different if you grow them yourself than what you get in the store. They're spending time as a family, saving money, and enjoying watching their flowers grow. It also is giving their home possibly a better curb appeal. So let's get started. First, gather ideas. Decide what plants you want to see in your garden. Again, go back to make a plan and search for ideas. If you already have a flower bed in existence, think about how you want to incorporate new plants into pre-existing areas. Think about colors, sizes, varieties. Think about what perennials you already have in your bed and their colors. This is also a good time to take note of where your perennials already are, so you'll be careful in planting. Before you plant though, make sure you've read the planting instructions on the packet. Some want full sun or partial sun. Keep an eye open now for how much sun your area will be getting, even though it will be a little different in the spring. Plant in odd numbers to make it look more natural. Also, if this is your first time planting bulbs, you may want to start small and see how it goes. This is totally up to you. Plant a little variety of some of your favorites and see how they look next spring. Don't forget to test the soil in your area. So why do we need to plant for spring and the fall? Some bulbs need to be planted in the fall to have the cool soil to keep them dormant. And some bulbs need planting even in the spring. This is nice in case you don't get everything in the ground in the fall. You still have an opportunity. I'm going to go over a few favorites in the different bulb options to give you an idea. They need to be dormant, so the biochemical process gets them ready to bloom. Obviously, get them in the ground before the first frost or the ground freezes. So what are the different types of bulbs? Before we really dig in, you need to know that not all bulbs are really bulbs. While they're all usually referred to as bulbs, some do have different names. I'll explain to you the difference between the 4 types: the bulbs, corms, tubers, and rhizomes. Some have obvious differences, but they are similar in food storage capabilities. The majority like to be planted while dormant. Then they grow, bloom, store food, and go dormant again. A bulb has the entire complete plant in this package. Each bulb contains future roots, stems, leaves, and flower. It's divided into layers in the bulb, like an onion. The bulb is actually formed from the plant stem and leaves. The fleshy scales contain the necessary food for the bulb to grow. So as the plant grows, little bulblets are formed. These bulblets can be removed or left on and will grow into a new plant. What do I do if I bought bulbs and forgot about them in my cold garage all winter, you ask? Don't worry, we've all done it. You can still plant them in the spring, but they will probably just produce foliage, meaning just leaves with no bloom. More than likely, they will bloom the following spring though. Corms look very similar to bulbs, except that it's solid inside without layers. They have a very short and squatty look and have a dry, papery outer layer. They have a modified stem that is filled with the food storage. The eye of the corm appears on the top, which makes it easier to know how to plant since the sprout comes from it. The original corm will disappear after the flower blooms, but a new one forms the next year. Some corms will develop cormlets, similar to bulblets, that will grow into more plants. Again, plant in odd numbers. Pay attention to when your corms will be blooming so that you have an idea of what will be coming up and at what time. Tubers are non-creeping, which is the difference between a tuber and a rhizome. They are thick underground stems with food storing roots. The nutrients allow the part of the plant to survive the winter or adverse conditions. They are asexual, so new plants develop from the tubers. They form eyes on the surface. A diagram indicates where the eyes are as well as the old and new tubers. Tubers are propagated by planting a piece of the tuber with several healthy eyes. The shoots will grow upward from the buds and form plants. Some tubers look like fat fingers. The tubers are easy to see, especially with daylilies, for example. You'll see a picture of the daylily tuber later in the slides. Rhizomes are thick stems that grow along the soil surface. These are especially easy to see with iris. Growth buds form on the rhizomes for the next season's growth. The original rhizome will not reflower. Roots form on the underside while the leaves and stems sprout from the top. Most of the persistent plants come from rhizomes. An example of that would be lily of the valley. Some rhizomes even have what they call runners. So I'll show some examples of bulbs. The first is the Allium, one of my favorites, because they are long-lasting, sometimes up to 3 weeks. Plant accordingly, since they grow 32 to 36 inches tall. It is also called an ornamental onion, since it's from that family. After it blooms in early spring, it turns brown, but the actual flower will stay intact. You can spray paint them if you want to keep color going in your garden from them. Daffodils come in a wide variety of colors, shapes, and species. Squirrels are not fond of the daffodil bulbs because they have a smell or a taste, so I like to plant them with my tulip bulbs. By mixing them together, it also gives a more natural look. The hyacinth is by far the most fragrant of the bulbs. They come in a variety of colors. A word of caution, I've bought hyacinth bulbs and didn't wear my gloves when planting. I ended up with an itchy rash because the bulbs had been treated with an antifungal dust. I personally have never experienced this with any other bulbs. I just mentioned this in case someone is sensitive to the dust as well. The Snowdrop is a beautiful white flower that blooms in late winter to early spring. They aren't very tall, so they would do best at the edge of your flower bed. Even the bulbs are tiny, but they do propagate quickly. Tulips, the classic sign of spring. They come in thousands of colors, varieties, shapes, and height. They also come in early, mid, and late bloomers. So if you want to plant all of these types, make sure you read the directions to know what kind you're getting and how they will show in your garden as they bloom at different times. When planting, don't forget to make sure the bulb tip points upward. Most people would assume that crocus are bulbs, but they are corms. They come in a variety of colors and will propagate easily. Crocus pop up and bloom before most tulips and daffodils. They aren't very tall, so they would be pretty mixed with the snowdrops on the edge. Freesia is one of the corms that you need to plant in early spring for summer and fall blooms. Since you're planting for the spring, make several plantings a few weeks apart for continued beauty. They also come in a variety of colors and are very fragrant. Planted in a grouping makes a beautiful display in your flower bed. They have small growths appear on the corm called cormlets that will grow into plants as well. You can see in the slide that the cormlets have formed on the sides of the main corm. Gladioluses are considered tender corms and should be dug up each season. Although I did forget to dig mine up the year of the polar vortex, they still came back the next year. Obviously, they may not be that tender. This is another one that should be planted in the spring and at 2-week intervals. They are taller plants, so they look great up against the fence of a building or towards the back of your garden. Grape hyacinths are similar to regular hyacinths, but on a much smaller scale and comes from corms. Blooms in the early spring and look beautiful near the borders. Because they propagate so quickly, they need to be dug and divided every 3 to 5 years or their blooms will diminish. Anemones are a tuber that have both spring and fall varieties. The variety on the right is a late summer, early fall bloomer and one of my late summer favorites. Different species can be invasive, so just be on the lookout. Planting in October seems to be an ideal time for them. Begonia tubers can be propagated 2 ways. One way is to do it by stem cutting as shown, and the other is simply from the tuber itself. They have beautiful flowers with vibrant colors in yellow, salmon, orange, pink, white, and red. Caladiums are truly an asset to any garden. Even though they don't produce flowers, their arrowhead-shaped leaves come in a variety of colors with different color veins in them. Caladiums are planted in the spring, but they definitely will not winter over. So if you want to keep them going, bring them inside or dig up the tubers and winter them over accordingly. Dahlias add such a different look and texture to any garden. Some of the tubers are very expensive, but there's a way around this. Each tuber produces a single plant, but if you start it inside in, say, early March, as it grows, you could take a cutting in April, and then you can set out 2 in May. Think that you just might be able to get several plants from that one tuber. Think of the money you can save while beautifying your garden. Daylilies are seen everywhere due to the fact they are so easy to grow. The most suggested plant is in either spring or fall, but as hardy as they are, they could be planted during the summer as well. They bloom during the summer months and they propagate easily. When you start noticing they aren't blooming as well anymore, then they need to be dug and separated. There is an incredible amount of varieties, colors, and variations to choose from. Peonies are considered a garden classic. They have beautiful blooms that have such an amazing fragrance. Peonies are easy to grow with no need to dig them up in the fall. They have beautiful, vibrant colors, but please make sure they have room to grow and plenty of sunshine. They do best when they are planted in the fall, like September, October. So many colors, reds, pinks, and whites are the most common, but they also come in yellow, purple, and coral. Probably the most common rhizome is a canna. They need plenty of water once you plant them to get them going. They are tall plants and make a beautiful backdrop in any garden. They also come in dwarf size as well. The dwarf size works beautifully in the center of a large planter with shorter plants surrounding it. Tropical looking leaves with striking color blooms are an asset to each garden. They need to be dug up at the end of fall. It's then you will see how much they have propagated. Store in a cool, dry place for proper dormancy. There are some rhizomes that are considered, air quotes, bad. Creeping Charlie is the first that comes to mind. Some people use it as a ground cover. Horsetail is tall and has no flowers. Pampas grass is very showy and comes in different colors, while some bamboo grows incredibly fast and spreads, so you better make sure you like where you planted it. Creeping Charlie is hard to get rid of once you get it. It does produce small purple and blue flowers and was thought to have some medicinal value. Horsetail is non-flowering and can get tall. You definitely need to have room for it. Pampas grass is very showy and can grow as tall as the gutters on a ranch house. Bamboo has many uses, but make sure it's right where you want it because some varieties can grow up to 4 foot a day with a max of 75 feet. Some of the main things I'd like you to take away are: make a plan. This makes it so much easier to decide on what bulbs, corms, tubers, rhizomes you want to purchase. Check to see if you plant in the spring or fall for the variety you choose, or if it's an early, mid, or late bloomer. Always follow the directions to know the correct depth, plant height, hours of sun needed, type of soil, etc. Make sure you add fertilizer to your soil. Nitrogen is important for preparing soil for bulbs to be able to start their leaf growth. Phosphorus and potash are good for overall health, resisting disease, root growth, and flowering. Remember to plant in a well-drained area, and it's always best to plant in groups of odd numbers. Occasionally, bulbs, corms, tubers, and rhizomes need to be divided or they'll stop blooming. Sometimes placing chicken wire over the bulbs will help to keep pesky critters from digging them up. Placing pie tins, a plastic owl or hawk, or even human hair will discourage these critters. Plant tulips and daffodils together for a different look, and remember that there is a smell taste with daffodil bulbs that squirrels don't like, so use that to your advantage. Add different species and varieties so you have continuous blooms. Usually your crocus bloom first, then tulips, and then allium as an example. Companion plants add height and structure to carry the bed when the bulbs are dying off or going dormant, like your perennials and bushes you already have in your garden. It's important to let the foliage die down because it's what feeds the bulbs for the next season, so don't cut them off after they bloom. Mark where your bulbs, corms, and tubers are before they die completely off, so you don't accidentally dig them up if you decide to add another plant in your garden. Rhizomes are usually pretty visible. Intermixing bulbs, corms, tubers, and rhizomes with your perennial garden will give you a nice burst into spring. Choose colors, varieties, etc. that fit into what you have and give it a sense of continuity. Again, let your bulbs, etc. die down completely before removing the dead foliage. Your perennials will help cover their not so pretty state. Remember to plant in well-drained areas. If water sits where your bulbs are planted, they will rot. Remember that sunlight promotes growth for your new plants, so make sure they get plenty. Transplanting may be done, whether it's due to clumping, so you don't, or they don't bloom, or you just don't like the location in your garden. This is an easy process. Just dig them up, separate them, and then replant at the proper depth needed. It is best to move them as soon as foliage has completely died down. Don't forget to mark their new location with small stakes so you don't forget where they are. One of the best parts in many bulbs, corms, tubers, and rhizomes is that they will naturalize, meaning they'll return year after year. Bulbs, corms, tubers, and rhizomes need that chilling period so they can grow and rebloom for the next spring. If they aren't in the ground, then they need to be kept in a cool, dry place until it's time to plant them. Don't forget, if you already have flowering bushes like a forsythia to plant a color near it so it will pop like a red or a purple against the yellow. Bulbs do great in containers as well. So if you're going to plant in a container, refrigerate the bulbs, then plant in the containers in early spring. The words on the chart might be a little hard to see, but you get an idea of the depth of the bulb and height that they grow to. There are plenty of charts online to check out as well, so pick one that fits your plan the best. Hopefully this clears up the difference between bulbs, corms, tubers, and rhizomes. Please remember, the most important thing is don't stress. Make your garden a reflection of you and make it enjoyable. If you have questions, feel free to email me. Please put in the subject line, bulb presentation. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me. I wish you all a beautiful spring garden.